Research and Engagement, Jon Collins.
Not CTO, Howard Holton.
And this week, we'll try and cut through the jargon and give you what you need to make sense of it all. And we're going to be talking about what is cloud becoming. So let's do it. We're getting there. I'm in a kind of transitional phase on my title, so I'm working on that. But by 6 months' time, I'll have it off pat. But as we were talking about this before we started, I think the thing that's really intriguing me right now is, I mean, analysts are full of whatever you want to say they're full of, but yeah, we can make stuff up. And a lot of the time we make stuff up based on what we hear out there or what we think might be true or whatever. But I've been speaking to a few organizations recently. I've spoken to vendors, I've spoken to end users, and the way that people talk about cloud seems to have changed, and it's probably changed 18 months ago, and I wasn't noticing. But someone gave me a really good example. They said, yeah, before we were kind of seeing our cloud as a kind of scorched earth strategy. It was like kind of, let's throw everything away and move entirely to the cloud. That was the thing. And now I'm hearing people go, well, cloud is a thing, but it's not necessarily the thing. So you can get into multi-cloud and hybrid and blah, 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 all of those things. But I just thought, was I caught out? Was I wrong all along? Did I kind of miss something? Have I suddenly discovered a massive epiphany that no one else had noticed? What's going on? So there you go. There's my intro. Okay. What do you reckon?
It's no different than client server, right? Remember, I mean, before client server, we were all kind of mainframing, right? Client server hit, and it hit some organizations quicker than others, and they adopted it 100%. And it was most of those organizations that never had mainframe and never had server, and they just had client before, and they added server to kind of link everything together. And there were like, I don't know, 2 decades where everybody said client server is going to eat the world, mainframe's dead.
Yeah.
And then everybody just kind of shut up about it. And mainframe is still ticking along today, 40 years after that dialogue began. Because the reality is organizations are complex. Business is complex, and there's no real single tool that solves the problem. And anytime we say this tool is going to eat that tool, we tend to be wrong, especially when they're large, when they're huge, right? It was one thing for virtualization to come along and say virtualization is going to eat standard OS. Okay, cool, whatever, right? It's going to eat regular monolithic deployments. Okay, fine, whatever. But then containers came along, and containers are going to eat application development. They eat 10% of application development, 15% of application development, right? Like, the more we look into this stuff, the more these big, broad statements that will, especially journalists are famous for making, turn out to be wrong, because this stuff is complex, right? And getting a 250,000 person organization to move takes a lot of effort and a lot of buy-in and a lot of training and a lot of organizational change control. And what we end up finding is it's not all necessary. New and shiny doesn't mean great.
And I think that's something else. So as soon as I know, why is a very popular question in the Howard Holton land of asking questions. But as soon as you start saying, well, why should I shift this thing? And it immediately becomes, well, because it's going to be something, it's going to be cheaper when you move it. Well, yeah, but is it really? Because then you've got to take into account the cost of migration.
Cost of migration, cost of training, cost of retention, cost of hiring, cost of.
Exactly. So it's just kind of, well, why should I move it? And if you haven't got a kind of, there's 1,000 things. As a CIO, there's 1,000 things I'm trying to do right now. So it's either got to be on my desk in front of me right now is the most compelling thing I've got to do, or, well, I won't. Simple.
Well, it's actually why I don't like ROI as a concept. Right? I've never been a fan my entire career. I've never liked ROI, because in 3 seconds I can look at it and go, yeah, that's a BS ROI. Right? I've called vendors out in the room as a customer. This was cloud, and a vendor was trying to convince the whole room, there was a whole room of us, that hyperconverged was the way to go, and it was cheaper than cloud. And they bring up their thing and they show it, and I snagged the I very quickly I wrote down the data that they were using, and then
Mhm.
I checked it against AWS, and I went, okay, cool. Question, yes. So two different questions, but kind of related to the same thing. Your numbers there. First, why did you choose the most expensive AWS region to base all your numbers on? Because it is also the least likely region based on where all of us sit in the world. And of course, I get crickets.
Mhm.
Second, what did you use for power and cooling for the cost on your data center costs? Again, crickets. Well, those were too varied for us to figure. Okay, sure, but to exclude them excludes a very significant piece of what it actually costs to run this. Also, I don't see any networking. I don't see personnel. I don't see any of the things that are actually required to run this stuff on-prem. I get where you're going, but none of your numbers actually show that this is cheaper. It shows that it is significantly more expensive. Matter of fact, it's almost double the cost of cloud when I figure the most likely region that I'm going to use and all of the other costs that are obvious that you excluded. And you can do that with any ROI, right? Okay, cool. What is the cost of the change? Forget about the cost of running. What is the cost of the change?
Mhm.
Right? Oh well, we don't calculate that, and we don't calculate that, right? Figuring out how to calculate that is very, very complex. But it also means the ROI isn't really the ROI, right? And we all got bit by cloud because we were told this is utopia. Go there, it'll all work. It's all magic, and none of that was true.
Mhm.
Right?
I think there's I may be wrong. Again, I'm very happy if I'm wrong on this, but the other thing that's not acting in cloud's favor, and don't get me wrong, I think I don't have a problem with cloud-based workloads.
I don't either. Not at all.
It's I think it's not even for certain workloads. For loads of workloads, it's a great thing. It's a great place to put your stuff. And we could talk about I mean that would be a great podcast. All the things that the cloud's brilliant at. It's kind of.
I don't think there's any workload. I'm going to speak a little bit hyperbolically here. I don't think there's any workload that the cloud isn't great for. That being said, I could identify 1,000 workloads in your organization that I wouldn't put in the cloud. Right? You being any organization.
Mhm.
That's not because the cloud isn't good at it. That's because the time, the place, the organization, the complexity, the difficulty, the team managing it, the maturity of the organization, and the net benefit versus what you're doing now isn't worth it.
Mhm.
It's not that cloud is bad. I don't want anyone to think that I think cloud is bad. I do not. But cloud is a different type of complexity than what you've been doing for the life of your business. And therefore, it can never be a light switch decision. It can never be cloud is better. Well, no, it's not. Cloud is complex. Just in the same way what you run on-prem is complex. All of the if there's 1,000 complexities that exist in running it on-prem, there's 1,000 complexities that exist in running it in cloud. They're just different complexities.
And that was kind of one of the again, I'm testing a hypothesis. So this is John tests hypothesis in a live environment thing. So the other thing that you've got with cloud that I think was seen as a good thing, and I think it is a good thing, is it has no edges. So with traditional technology stacks, you were very restricted by what you did, largely because you could only run it on a certain number of servers. You had to limit yourself by costs, etc., etc. With cloud, you want a bit of extra storage. You want to try that with a serverless plugin. You want to add some containers to that. You want to do you can do anything, and it's all with a flick of a switch, and that's done in the name of an innovation. But the trouble is, then you can end up with massively complex environments just because there's no control, there's no edges, there's no one saying, well, only use certain elements of the cloud. It's like, no, fill your boots, do whatever you like. Right. You want 3 different databases to run the same application, and put bits of data in each of the 3, and then have a serverless thing over the top, and then maybe throw that bit away and forget that you did it in the first place, but you still got plugged into it, etc.
There's a guy I follow on LinkedIn. I believe, if I'm thinking of the right guy, his name is Aaron Rouse. Aaron does Enterprise Architect Tip of the Day, or Thought of the Day. Enterprise Architect Thought of the Day. And one that he's done, I swear it's been 15 times, is he shows the the total sphere of what an enterprise architect really is supposed to look at, and IT is this little box. And he goes, "This is enterprise architecture, and it is effectively everything the enterprise does."
Mm.
And this is what most people think enterprise architecture is, and then he blacks the rest of it out, and it's just IT. If you just think enterprise architecture is IT, cloud is going to be rough for you.
Oh, well, that's. I mean, is that sort of Zachman frameworky kind of stuff?
It's
Because
kind
that
of
takes me back.
TOGAF-y.
Say again. Oh yeah, TOGAF. Yeah.
TOGAF framework, and ultimately he's 100% right, and it speaks to exactly what you're saying, right? The cloud gives you the ability to experiment in the largest dev environment that can also be your production environment, right? And so if you have bad practices on-prem, taking that to the cloud is going to amplify those bad practices. Right? If you're inefficient, if your controls are lacking, or if your controls are too tight, because that's the other one I see, right? The GRC team or GRCS team is far too restrictive for us to actually get business done. So we've shadow IT'd everything in the cloud. Right? Oh, why did that go poorly? Well, that went poorly because, we have 97 tenants. And when we added it all up and did an audit last year, we found that while we thought we were spending $5 million a year on cloud, we're actually spending $105 million on cloud. And none of it's regulated. Right? Okay, cool. So how do you put it back together? Well, you can't. You can't undo that kind of damage in any reasonable amount of time. Right? You effectively are going to flush all of that down the toilet and rebuild it. And ultimately, your compliance and governance and risk and security teams are all going to have to get on board and recognize that their job is to say yes and or no but, not just no. Right? Not just only. Right? I've been in many organizations where those teams felt they were the business, and those teams are never, ever, 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 ever the business. Right? Mitigate risk, don't remove it. Reduce risk, don't remove it. Right?
It is that real tricky balance between. I mean, one of my personal soapboxes about agile and all of those practices are that uncontrolled processes are exactly what they suggest they are. You've got to have a level of controls, but getting the balance right between controls and being able to achieve stuff quickly is the trick. I mean, that's the hugely hard thing. That's the thing that magicians make look easy by sleight of hand, and you see that with Scrum Master General experts that are so good at that, and they make it look easy, but it ain't. No. Getting that stuff right is super hard. Getting any team to do things quickly and dynamically, yet with a level of structure, so they've got records of everything that they did, and then they know what they're doing next. It's hugely hard, and I think Agile plus Cloud is really a combination that's allows the worst sides of us all to swim in all kinds of things we shouldn't be swimming in.
I mean, when was the last time? And this is a question that I'd like everyone that hears this to kind of internalize and think about. When was the last time you really looked at your operating model and compared your operating model to what you're trying to get done and aligned those two things? Right? I think if most of us thought about our operating model, we'd find we're using an operating model from 2004. Right? We have a lot of silos. We have a lot of kind of tactical execution. We're really not leaning on architecture a whole lot. Like, architecture is a thing that happens at the beginning, and then it's turned over, and we walk away, and then it just kind of sits that way for a long time. When was the last time you thought about, how do I be agile in a way that reduces technical debt rather than adds to it? How do I be agile in a way that delivers value to the business rather than create sprawl?
I'm almost, you could have cut off just the first part of the statement. When was the last time you looked at your operating model? Full stop, end of, because if you haven't looked at it, if you don't know what it is, it chooses you. If you don't choose your operating model, you'll have one anyway.
Yep.
It's just not necessarily the one you wanted.
It's like culture. right? Everyone has a culture. If you spent no time on it, you still have a culture. It's just a culture that organically grew, and it may not be the culture you want, right? The security in DevOps has always been there from day one, from minute one. DevSecOps doesn't change that, right? If you're not doing DevSecOps where Sec is brought to the table and you're thinking about it, well, then Sec has a null value and you inherit the null value.
Yep.
Right?
And if it's about risk management,
you are so much better off being thoughtful and prescriptive, even if the thoughtfulness is, I can't tackle this now, add it to the backlog. I would rather see it in the backlog every week and be able to do nothing about it than never see it in the backlog and someday realize, oops, I should have done something about this. Because at least in one, I'm making an active choice.
Yep. And it's like, I don't know, the list of things you need to fix in your house. The roof is leaking. It doesn't matter whether or not you care about it or whether or not you acknowledge it, but the roof is leaking whether you like it or not.
Correct. These things happen whether you want them to or not. Right? The timeliness of paying the mortgage doesn't matter whether you want to pay the mortgage or you agree with the price. Mortgage comes along, you got to pay it, or the consequences will likely be dire. Right? The same is true of your operating model. So think about what your operating model is, and then think about what cloud demands, and just think, are those two things aligned? Right? And if they're not, again, you're going to have a bad time. Do you have an enterprise architecture team, and does that enterprise architecture team actually architect for the totality of the enterprise, not just IT? If they just architect for IT, that's fine. You have systems architects, you have application architects, network architects, storage architects. Those are all fine, but they're not enterprise architects, and stop calling them such. Right? And then we can talk about why we've changed the context around cloud, right? A decade ago, we were told cloud is going to eat everything and everyone will move to cloud. We saw all these vendors then start ramping. Well, first, almost every traditional vendor stuck their thumbs in their ears and said, we're not listening. And then they all almost universally said, okay, cool, we're going to support the cloud. And then most of them got in trouble because they were only feeding one garden and not the other garden, right? They stopped feeding their on-premise garden, right? The things they made that were traditional, that brought in revenue. And they just assume that business has been good at caring and feeding for itself, and it will continue to care and feed for itself. And that never happens. The garden gets overgrown and the plants die. And then they started feeding this new cloud garden. And then a few years later realized, hey, what happened to all of our revenue?
That's funny, actually. So years ago, someone was talking about another very well thought of analyst. And it was someone who wasn't an analyst who said, trouble with that person is they started actually believing what they were saying at some point. So we can all throw out this stuff as rhetorical, marketing statements, like, because there's money to be made in saying that you've got to move to my architecture. But if you start believing that it's true, then well, you've got to. It's not whether or not you're believing it. It better be bloody true.
Correct. Correct. Because if you're wrong, you will have no end of people waiting to say, I told you so. Right? And they will be right and you will be wrong. And and they're right and you're wrong will cost you, well, billions of dollars or your business. Right? Yeah, we talk to a lot of companies that have that level of arrogance and hubris. And it always kind of boggles my mind. Like, you don't own 100% of the market. So doesn't that mean there's room for improvement? Doesn't that mean there's space for you to learn?
Yeah.
And it kind of constantly boggles my mind.
Yep. No, it's interesting and ironic that the conversation that's kind of started as, well, the CIOs are blinked. It's like kind of they're not moving wholesale to anything. And I'm getting definitely a feeling that that's true. It's not that I'm quite happy with what I got. It's just that I've got what I've got. And there was always the keeping the lights on thing. Like, keeping the lights on was a bad thing. Actually, keeping some lights on is a good thing, because you just want that light to be on. You don't want to do anything other than have that light being on. And some old workloads are just like that. Look, it's just processing some salary data over there. It's costing X. It would cost Y if we moved it with no overheads of shifting it. It's going to cost Z to shift it, and etc. The maths just doesn't pan out. So let's just leave it costing X.
Mm-hmm.
It's just really interesting, that sort of thing. But then the conversation transitioned to people, end user organizations, vendor organizations, actually kind of thinking that they were better than tech.
Sure.
And seeing the whole of enterprise architecture just as the tech bits and not the business models and not the operating models and everything else. So I guess we're all to blame from that point of view.
I mean, it's true, right? The way this kind of cyclical nature of any market, but technology, because it changes so fast, it's especially bad, is FOMO gets construed as value.
Oh.
Right?
Yeah.
So for a long time, cloud was FOMO.
Mm-hmm.
The board would say, what is our cloud strategy? Well, our cloud strategy is no cloud. No, we don't like that strategy. I want a real cloud strategy. Okay, but cloud doesn't actually fit, like we don't have any lack of capability within what we do within our current model. So all cloud's going to do is be a change and on a lot of upfront cost to try to do the same thing that we're doing today. So it doesn't really have value for us. Okay, well, we still want a cloud strategy. Well, all right then. And you saw a lot of companies jump on cloud only as their strategy, and that's crashed and burned almost completely. Now, again, there are plenty of organizations that are digital first, that started in the digital age, that started today, and have never had anything but cloud, and it's working fine for them. Great. There are also plenty of organizations that did that bootstrapped by using cloud and have realized that at their scale, for what they do, for how they do it, on-prem has more value. And they took the lessons they learned from cloud and they run their on-prem very much like they do the cloud. Running a data center, running infrastructure, running systems and applications and services the way cloud runs is extremely efficient if you can do it. Right? And so long term, right, the beauty of the concept of hybrid multi-cloud is it all runs the same regardless of where it runs. So if I run it on-prem, I still run it as though it is a cloud. I still design it as and architect it as though it is a cloud. I still interact with it as though it is a cloud. I just happen to be in the infrastructure business for those things. Right? And the difference should be, am I in the infrastructure business or not?
Yeah, and that's the old business value question, isn't it? Which comes back to your enterprise architect's point of, do you want to run it yourself or do you want to give it to someone else? And that's where I think certainly interestingly, there's a whole phrase you can use, so I'll trot it out really quickly. It wasn't ever outsourcing or insourcing, it was right sourcing. It wasn't ever offshoring or onshoring, it was right shoring, etc., etc. And what I've heard people say recently is it's not about all in or all out. It's about right clouding. I can't remember what the phrase is, but the long and the short equally then is you're probably, as a large company, going to involve your systems integrators, your partners, your hosting providers, etc., to be doing all of those things. So it's not just about right clouding; it's also about working with your partners.
It's about building an ecosystem and building an ecosystem that's right for you. And an ecosystem can't be we do it all ourselves. Right? Like if that's your solution, then you're the wrong person. And I don't care. I'm good with that being a blanket statement. Right? Because it is impossible for you to know everything, for you to be the best at everything, even for your business. You need to develop an ecosystem, and that ecosystem is people, technology, process, peers, lessons learned from other places, right? The things you contribute back. It's an ecosystem, and you need to feed that ecosystem.
Yeah. Right. I'm just wondering if the one thing that I wonder if has been a catalyst to all of this, and I know we were talking about this yesterday, but it is SEO. Because I was thinking about terms like digital transformation, that whether or not they're right or wrong, when you're writing a blog and you can use one of these SEO tools that says, hey, if you're writing a blog about business, why don't you put in the expression digital transformation? Because that's what everyone's searching for. And before you know it, you've got in all the same buzzwords as everyone else. So if
Right.
you've got cloud first in there, then you're higher up the search rankings. And we all end up being force-fed the Kool-Aid and force-fed the fact that we then have to give the Kool-Aid to everyone else. It's just in order to get up the search rankings. So if I can just blame Google for the whole thing, or at least, search engines.
Bottom, right? It ends up just being a drive to the bottom.
Mm.
Because if the SEO says you should put in digital transformation, but you really don't know what it means, and you add it anyways, then you're just adding to the noise. And okay, your noise is seen, but it's still just noise. And at some point, we need to be able to have the pride to say, no, I don't want to be part of the noise. I would rather be extremely valuable and as correct as I can be to a smaller audience than not valuable and incorrect to a large audience.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's my problem with the media, with traditional news organizations, because they all do that. They all report on all the same feed, and when you talk to them, they're like, "Yeah, I don't like that. I don't like those 7 stories that we had to publish today, but everybody else published them, and if we didn't, the eyeballs will go somewhere else." Right?
Yeah.
Well, at some point, someone's got to blink. Right? At some point, we have to say this system is thoroughly broken, and so we're not going to participate that way. And I'm okay having a smaller audience that is loyal because I give them a transparent reality and not this made up foofy garbage that doesn't really mean anything.
And it's short-term game versus. I think the trouble with the media. I mean, there's a whole that's at least another half hour. But a problem that the media's got is the other race to the bottom, which is there's very, very low margins in it. So if you try and play by different rules, you could put yourself out of business, which then makes just about every media organization, including the most illustrious, traditional, etc., playing the same stupid games. Because I remember working for a charity once.
That's true, though. That's the other thing, is I don't know that it's true because no one's actually tried. Like, no large media organization has done it. Did you watch the HBO show Newsroom by Aaron Sorkin?
No.
Okay, watch it. It's Jeff Daniels.
Yeah, no.
Aaron Sorkin.
Absolutely should.
Effectively, they do that, right? He runs he runs the most popular or third most popular, second most popular evening news show. Jeff Daniels does, and he kind of has a breakdown and decides they're just going to do the news differently. They're going to do all the things that we all kind of wish the news would do, and he does it. And they absolutely take a hit, and then they recover strongly, incredibly strongly. And the thing is, I don't know that anybody's actually tried it and had the wherewithal to stick with it, to actually see what would happen, because we all beg for the same thing, right? And all of us say the same thing. Well, we can't handle the hit. Can you not handle the hit because you only look at a quarter and you have no long game? Right? If that's true, maybe we should develop a long game. Like the company doesn't disappear in 3 quarters, right? And I get that the average tenure for a C-level executive is 2 years or 3 years, but maybe we should start planning for the long game and not the short game.
I think we need to take that one offline, Howard. I'm already bubbling with ideas. Bubbling, I am. But I guess so. To wrap, maybe, as we just crossed the threshold of 30 up in the counter there. So I'm gonna just think this through. The world continues to change. Sorry, that's a bit of a massive blanket statement. And technology change is a constant, not a. There's nothing unusual. Nothing's changed. And what you said very early on was the fact that we've just created more things we've got to deal with. And the old stuff is never going to go away. I think what I'm still to see out there, we've got observability, we've got various bits of tool, but I don't really see anyone really looking to address the complexity of the result, the hybrid, multi-cloud, multi-platform, on-prem, etc., vigorously. The hyperscalers are not, because they'd be cannibalizing their own marketing message. The traditional vendors are still kind of waking up to the fact that they weren't wrong in the first place, but they're not right now, and they need to work that stuff out. So I'm not really seeing any kind of, we know how to solve for this. coming out of the vendor community.
So I've seen some interesting things lately, right? And we'll look at kind of application modernization stacks, right? Container management stacks. And let's just kind of break that down for a quick 30 seconds. The problem is complexity, fragility, and scalability. Right? When I think about a monolithic application, I don't care how many pieces of code, how many applications run on that monolith. They all run on one server. They communicate with each other. The communication outward, the outbound and inbound communication, is relatively constrained, monitored, and managed. I have scalability problems. Again, it's a monolith, but that's fine, right? They tend to work the way they were designed to work. At some point, we break those out and we say these things can be used for more than one thing. They can stand on their own. And then we can manage them as individual applications and have the agility and flexibility to change to the thing that fits the purpose best as we move on. And I don't have to re-architect the whole application to change the database, as an example. I mean, I probably do, but the level of effort is lower, right? And we get these wonderful things like service mesh and application platform networking and all these wonderful new terms. However, the problem is when it goes poorly, where is it actually going poorly? Do I have a misconfiguration in the config file? Do I have a lack of resources? Is there a network configuration that's a problem? Like, where does it actually go wrong? And if I look at each tool tells me about itself. Right? And so I can take a look and I can go, okay, cool. Well, this seems like it's working, and this seems like it's working, and this seems like it's working, and this seems like it's working. But the reality is it's still not working. And there are a few vendors that are now saying, okay, well, we're going to look at all 5 of these stages, and we're going to use telemetry between the stages and tell you what is actually wrong. Okay, cool. But it only works for the 8 things we support, or the 10 things we support, or the 12 things we support. And there's 265,000 things that are possible. There's 500 databases you could choose to run in your containerized environment, right? Kubernetes is not the only container application platform you can run in. There's 50 different networking tools you can use. Right? So the tools that are coming along that say that they can give you that thing that you want, where you understand the interconnective bits and that telemetry, there's a limited application set that they can manage, because you have to build the knowledge base of each one, the communication and that telemetry analysis for each tool that you add. And there's no way to do it any other way. Right? AI is not gonna instantly solve that for us. And so we kind of have to figure out, what do we actually want? What are we actually trying to accomplish? And again, FOMO isn't value. So that fear that you have that this thing will restrict you from doing this other thing, stop. What is the value of the other thing? And what is the value you're trying to achieve today? And everything evolves. Right? So if that platform supports 12 tools today, will those 12 tools be good enough? Because tomorrow it'll support 14, and then 16, and then 18, and then 50. Right? So can you grow and mature with the tool? And are you conflating restriction with maturity? Like, if your maturity doesn't match the ability to leverage that other tool set, and your organization is not agile enough to make that change that quick, then you're creating problems where no problem actually exists. It only exists in your mind. Right? And
it does come down to that. What do you tighten? What do you loosen? Kind of, but very interested. I mean, you use the term telemetry, so mine immediately went to open telemetry, which obviously you were talking about a lot broader than that. But I think it's fascinating to think that, you know, we've created all these problems by kind of adding cloud to the mix of, you know, here's another way of doing things, and that's opened the door to loads of opportunities, but each one comes with challenges, as you say. But I'm fascinated by going back to, if you can't measure, you can't manage. So, you know, we're starting to see with open telemetry the standardization of the ability to run something across 20, 50, 100 tools. Let's hope everyone adopts it. Maybe it's at the API level. I don't know. But
I don't know that everybody needs to adopt it, right? But I think you need to think about what are your actual capabilities, right? And that goes back to the operating model. Part of your operating model is analyzing what is the maturity of my organization, what are the capabilities I have within it, what are the capabilities I need, and how do I organize to best deliver that to my organization.
Mm.
So I think it all comes right back to understanding your operating model and building an operating model that fits for you today, that looks to the future and is right sized and right fit for your organization.
Comes back to
Yeah,
why.
it always comes back to why. So on that note, this has been an episode of The Good, the Bad, and the Techie. Please like, subscribe, comment. I'm still waiting to see some comments and some suggestions. If you've got an idea for a topic, we'd love to hear it. If you'd like to be a guest, please reach out. And otherwise, we hope to see you on the next episode. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.